All behavior is communication. How you respond to escalating behavior is often the key to diffusing it. Learn how to respond effectively when an individual is in risk behavior. No matter what the situation, keeping the lines of communication open can help to de-escalate a potentially dangerous crisis. Keep each other safe and help each other learn. For more information on de-escalation, contact the Office of School Safety and Security by either phone or email, or visit our page at the Department of Education website.
Hello, my name is Jason Gray with the Oklahoma State Department of Education's Office of School Safety and Security. When I was a classroom teacher, I found de-escalation to be an excellent training to help me understand the interactions between me and my students, how their behaviors affected my behavior, and how my behaviors affected their behaviors. Our office has partnered up with the Special Education Department to bring you this great training. At this time, I would like to introduce Michelle DeBerry from the Special Education Department. Michelle?
Well, thank you for the invitation to talk with you guys today. I am Michelle DeBerry. I've worked for the State Department of Education, but it will be about 3 years in July. I've been a speech pathologist, or I am a speech pathologist and a school psychometrist, and I've been a special education director in a district, and loved all of that time working with students with special needs. One of the things that I had the privilege of teaching, and we've continued that through the State Department, is crisis prevention. So we'll talk a little bit more about that today.
Who do you believe would benefit from de-escalation training?
Well, de-escalation training can and should be used by anyone and everyone. Really, it is just a way for us to think about a situation through a different lens and how we can potentially prevent a crisis from happening or from escalating just by the way that we respond or by the way that we support a student or a person that's in distress. It's a win-win for everybody if we can prevent some kind of escalation from happening. The people that would benefit from de-escalation training is really anyone, anyone in your school staff or people that you work around, from people that work and drive our buses in the transportation department, people in the front office, teachers, administrators, support personnel. All of us really can benefit from de-escalation training, as it helps us to think through preventing crisis through a different lens and how we support people who are in distress.
What can cause someone to escalate?
So individuals can escalate for any number of reasons and any number of precipitating factors. It can be whether or not we woke up late, we didn't get enough sleep, there's illness or stress in our families. When we look at students, we think about a lot of times kids may escalate because they don't have the skill to do the task or the assignment that we're asking them to do. It could be a trigger from some previous trauma that they have had. Really, almost anything can cause a crisis situation when we're looking at a student. We only see, if you think about the iceberg picture, we only see the very tip of the iceberg, but what's underneath is so much deeper and is really the root of what is going on with the student. And so we really need to think about, and again, understand what those precipitating factors can be or are for an individual student that may cause them to escalate. And our goal is to help support them through that.
How is trauma and the MTSS related to this type of training?
So crisis de-escalation, trauma-informed training, multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS, all really go hand in hand together. All of these systems are ways that we can support students through, again, different individual levels of support. And that's really what crisis de-escalation is all about. It's meeting that individual student where they need it and supporting them where they are, It's not a blanket approach. We're going to throw the blanket and fix everything. It's really an individualized support system for students. And when we talk about crisis de-escalation, that's exactly what we want to do. We're looking at that student, where that student is, what their precipitating factors are. There are many traumas that our students may experience, we may have had in our past, that may never come to light. We may never realize what those are, but we still have to work with those and deal with those students in our classrooms and in our hallways and on our buses on a day-to-day basis. And so when we meet those students where they need it, they're going to get the greatest benefit from that, and continue to move forward through their educational process.
What is the benefit to school staff who have been trained?
So crisis de-escalation training is really just another tool in your toolbox to use to help support students. If you're in the transportation department and you have students who get on the bus in the morning and they're out of sorts, these kind of things can help you support them through that ride to school. Sometimes you're the first friendly face that the kid sees that morning, and they need that smile. They need that support from folks that they're going to see at the early stage of the day. It could be the person in the lunch line that's just giving that person a smile. That can be de-escalation training, is just being prepared and having those tools. Certainly in the classroom, when we have students and you develop relationships with your students, you get to know them over the course of time. It just helps you, this training helps you feel more equipped to meet the students' needs. Because while we are there to provide academic and educational support, we deal with these students as human beings every single day. And human beings have their own issues, they have their own needs. And so this helps us to meet those needs. Certainly, our front desk personnel that meet individuals when they come to our school buildings. We have parents that may come to school and be upset for one reason or another. And when our front desk people really are ambassadors and meet folks that come in off the street, again, where they are, that helps prevent a crisis from happening or a situation from escalating in the future. Certainly school administrators would be able to use this on a daily basis. Really, any individual in your school can help build trusting and supportive relationships with students. And this, again, is just one more tool that can help you support students in that school setting.
Would de-escalation techniques and strategies work for adults as well as students in crisis?
Yes, absolutely. When a situation escalates with a student, if we are not trained, many of us may resort to things that are not effective or supportive for dealing with kids in crisis. But let's also think about adults, because we deal with adults that are in distress or in crisis situations in our schools every day. Think about a parent who's been called up to the school office during their work hours because their precious little darling was caught fighting on the playground. As an example, mom might be embarrassed. Dad might be upset that his kid didn't take the first swing, but his kid's still in trouble. But they both enter the office with significant precipitating factors. Things that are going on with them, their thoughts, their feelings, their fears. They get to the office and they have to wait on the principal because, the principal's dealing with another family or dealing with another issue or another child. And so they're anxious. They've had to leave their jobs, and this isn't the first time they've had to come to deal with a school issue. Waiting is hard. Their stress level's up. But there's some things that the front office staff could do to help help de-escalate the potential crisis in this situation. It may just be offering some water or a cup of coffee, or to get a time frame on when the principal might be available. It might be chatting about positive current events or things that are going on. It's giving the family some attention rather than just ignoring that they are waiting. There are many things that us as Support personnel can offer families that may be in a crisis or in a stressful situation as they're coming to school to deal with that. Think about families that didn't have positive school experiences when they were young, and now they're getting called to school to help or to deal with an issue with their children. It triggers a lot of feelings that some of us may have had when we were in school, or just again, that embarrassment, that fear. And so be aware of those issues, and I think if we address those as they are, it will help further that relationship with the family, and therefore support the student.
What are some warning signs that I may be in crisis?
So when we enter the situation, all of these things affect us as well as responders to a situation. And so we may feel our heart rate increase. We may feel our hearts pound. We may feel anxious. We may feel sweaty. We may feel the need to escape a situation or control a situation, and that really may not be ours to really control. And so all of those things can help us know that, hey, we may be in crisis as well, and we may need to ask for help from our peers and from our colleagues.
What is the difference between verbal and nonverbal de-escalation?
So when a student escalates verbally, that's that kiddo that is refusing, is questioning, yelling, cussing, or making intimidating threats. There are different ways that we can respond to those types of verbal escalation that can lead to overall crisis de-escalation. So when we respond verbally, we're giving students some choices. We're helping guide where they need to think and go. But again, it depends on where the student is and how they're acting with regards to rationality. Nonverbal escalation are those physical reactions or things that you can see that student in distress, displaying anxiety. Again, we've talked about fidgeting, that eye contact varying, students that pace, students that shut down, students that are defensive in their own body language, crossing their arms, again, putting that hoodie up, those kind of things. Again, this helps you give specific tools, specific skills that we can teach the student to work through those situations, to get them back in a state of rationality, to get them back in a state of calm so that we can make good decisions.
How would culture, age, gender, and cognitive ability affect your response to someone in crisis?
So again, our response is depending on the person's age, their culture, their gender, all of those things really depend on where we are. Remember that not everybody is going to respond the same way in a crisis situation or do the same thing when they feel distressed. And so again, we're going to have to adjust our communication, how we support the student based on the individual situation. One of the key things I love to talk about there is eye contact. A lot of times as adults, we want to demand or request or get eye contact from a student so we know they're listening. But please remember that that's not necessarily a sign that some individuals are listening. We have many cultures where children or young people are raised not to make eye contact with their elders, and that can be very disrespectful. Students and with other disabilities may not make eye contact very well, and some of us without disabilities may not make eye contact on a basis, certainly if we're being addressed by a person that we see as authority. So remember that you can talk and you can support a student whether or not they're making eye contact. That's one of the big things about culture that I think that we can miss as adults. And so moving forward, just know that, again, you have to look at every situation individually.
How can teachers learn to recognize anxiety? What are some behaviors?
So when our students begin to escalate, one of the first signs that we may see is signs of anxiety. So when you think about that, think about what does anxiety look like? That's one of the first questions when we're teaching this I like to ask is, what does anxiety look like? Well, it looks different in all of us. Some of our students may pace, some of our students may fidget. We may have kids that put their head down on their desk or put their hoodie up over their heads and really just kind of shut down. It really depends on the individual student. Think about that student that may just get out of sync a little bit when you give them a specific type of assignment. Maybe it's independent work and the student doesn't know how to get started or doesn't know what to do. Their go-to thing may be to shut down, or it may be to escape a situation, and there's many ways they can do that, or it may be refusal. The next thing kids may escalate to is really if we don't give them good supports at that level, the next thing a student may escalate to is a defensive behavior, where again, we may see a continued decrease in being able to listen or rationalize. Our students may question your authority. They may yell or swear at you. We get that power struggle. There's arguments and blame placed. So again, we want to try to catch students when they're first displaying some anxiety behavior, because if we can catch it then we can, again, shift that and not use as much time and energy as students become defensive, but we can really meet them. Remember that the student is communicating with you even through their anxious behavior. It may be, I don't know how to get started. This is hard. It could be, I didn't bring my pencil today, or I don't have my Chromebook, or I forgot to charge my Chromebook. They may not have the words to tell you those things. So their behavior, their reaction may show something completely different. So again, think about what those anxiety behaviors look like for your individual students. You're in the classroom, you know these students, and as you develop relationships with them, you'll see how anxiety plays out for each individual student.
What do defensive behaviors look like?
So defensive behaviors are really when we start that decrease in listening, that decrease in rationality. We are going from that frontal part of the brain more back to the brain stem, and those fight, flight, fawn, those kind of reactions, and there is that decrease in listening and rationality is starting to happen. That's where we may get those students that are yelling or swearing, questioning your authority, trying to have a power struggle with you, blaming. For those students that are really verbal, for body language, you can see those students just kind of puff up. They try to look bigger. They may elope or run from a situation. Certainly another big defensive behavior that we have to watch for. For students who are in that defensive mode, we really have to use time. And that's super hard for some of us, especially if the student has a raised voice, if they're yelling, certainly if they're swearing at us. We really have to take a look at that. This is not the time to repeat something over and over or nag a student about what they're doing or what they're not doing. This is not the time that we want to engage in that power struggle. We'll talk more about picking up the rope and that example here in a few minutes. But remember, this is the time that we want to give the student some options or some choices that they can live with and that we can live with, so that we can get them back into that frontal part of the brain where they can rationalize, where we can have a conversation, where we can kind of get to hopefully the root of the problem, and help, again, support that student that's in distress.
What are precipitating factors?
Precipitating factors are really those things that we come into a situation with. For us, it may be that we didn't get our coffee that morning, or we're running late, or there was a traffic jam or a traffic wreck in front of us. Maybe we had a fight with our significant other or our child. We didn't get enough sleep. We're trying to fit too much into one single day. We've been ill, that we have a loved one that's ill. All of those are precipitating factors that we may walk into a situation with. For our students, those precipitating factors may be again, some of the same things can be hunger, can be, they woke up late. It could be that they had a fight with a parent or with another friend or individual that day. It could be the fact that mom and dad fought all night last night and they didn't get enough sleep and they're worried about their family. It could be they're worried about a sibling or a grandparent. It could be anything that a student walks into or that we walk into a situation with. And we have to be very careful about those as professionals, as adults, in the classroom or in the education setting. We have to mitigate those with that professional responsibility that we have to educate our kids to the best possible extent that we have.
What does it mean to not pick up the rope?
So when I talk about picking up the rope, what I really mean is don't take this crisis situation personally. It is likely not about you. If the student is in distress, it's not related to you as a person, but it may be the fact that you assigned them something they don't know how to do, or they don't have what they need. It could be that they're hungry. We've already talked about all of those things. You may have accidentally triggered a trauma that has happened in the past. And so when we pick up that rope, we get into that power struggle with the student, and really neither of us are going to win. The student is not going to win. We're not going to win. It's not a good situation when we're having that tug of war with the student. So again, we want to give the student some choices. We want to give them options that they can live with at the time. Remember, it's not the time to let our own pride get the best of us. Again, winning is not the important thing here. It's really getting that student or that individual that's in distress de-escalated so that we can, again, bring them back to that frontal part of the brain and make some good decisions for each other.
What is the difference between a verbal intervention and a restrictive intervention?
So in the fall of 2020, when we were all trying to figure out COVID and how to get kids in school, the Oklahoma Administrative Code for Seclusion and Restraint was updated. And so I think it's important for us to know that restrictive interventions or restraints must only be used as a last resort for students. So of course, we don't want to put hands on any student. So again, that now is administrative code that we cannot do that. And that's a very, very last resort. So as a part of any kind of restraint training, you would also be involved in this de-escalation training. But the important part here is that any of us can provide that de-escalation component for students to help those students that are in distress in a certain situation. Again, all of the things that we're doing leading up to any potential restraint are hopefully supportive to the student. Again, trying to end that crisis situation or to keep it from escalating so that we never have to get to a point where we would have to restrain a student. So when the school district is thinking about a response team to crisis, there are a couple of ways that you can think about that. First of all, while everyone can play a part, every adult school staff member can play a part in crisis de-escalation, not everyone needs to play a part in the restraint of a student. Obviously not everyone is going to be available. We don't need that many people. Again, any restraint situation is very last resort. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But certainly you want people trained in case it needs to happen. But the purpose of having everyone trained in the de-escalation portion is really, again, just to build your overall crisis support team through the adults in your building so that you have people that have this training, again, in their toolbox, in their back pocket, so that anyone can support a student at any time.
Great stuff, Michelle. We greatly appreciate you stepping in and helping us out with this presentation. This topic brings to mind a situation someone near and dear to me experienced a while back in a classroom setting. Teacher's teaching class, student has a question, so the teacher goes over to help the student. When they bend down to look at the problem, the student escalates very quickly and without warning, stomps off, runs out of the room. When all the information is gathered, they piece together that the student had been abused early on in life, and the abuser wore the same kind of cologne that the person near and dear to me wore. So we just never know those precipitating factors that someone may be experiencing. And as we like to say in one of our trainings, never judge someone else's anxiety. I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. Please reach out if we can help you in any way. Have a great day.